Hello, everyone. Welcome to the penultimate meeting of the University Senate for academic year 22-23. We have a packed agenda today, so we'll get right to it. The agenda was circulated. Are there additions to the agenda as circulated? Additions to the agenda? Okay. Go ahead, please go to the mic.
I'd like to add under new business, raising the issue of the provost and the executive vice president of the hospital's response to our query about freedom of speech regarding the professor's tweet earlier in the semester and their response to it.
So noted. We will add that to the agenda.
Thank you.
With that addition to the agenda, is there any objection to the agenda as stated being approved?
No, it was clear.
Hearing no objections, the agenda is approved. We also circulated the minutes of the March 6th meeting. Are there any objections to the minutes or emendations, suggestions? We'll consider those approved as well. First on the list for today's meeting will be a report. We're trying to schedule reports by each of the standing committees. We'll have a report today from the standing committee, the Undergraduate Council, from the chair, Hannah Neckvissel. Hannah, are you there?
I'm here. May I share screen?
I think you can.
Okay.
Rich will take care of it.
Thank you, Richard. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, excellent. So folks, I'm going to keep this brief, but there's some very important things coming down the line, which are important for each and every one of you in some way, shape, or form. So just reminding you who we are a subset of the Senate. That is, we are representing you as well as other faculty around the campus, staff, and any other instructors. So our charge is to review and recommend policy to the provost and other administrators as appropriate concerning all aspects of the university's undergraduate academic program. This is as stated currently under the University Senate website. However, again, these are all subject to change as we look carefully at the subcommittees and their charges. What the Undergraduate Council has been focusing on during this academic year is this particular bullet point here in red, where it says that we are reviewing, coordinating all curricular and other academic matters that are not limited to a single major governance unit. So, for example, we're not interested if a particular program is wanting to add a second program or a second major. But obviously, this is very important as it relates to, I'm going to see if I can hold on for 1 second. Let me get this into slideshow. There we go. That makes it a little bit easier for us all. And get rid of these things out of my way. As it relates to the Stony Brook curriculum. So the Stony Brook curriculum has been a difficult one for the Undergraduate Council to address because there really hasn't been a good avenue for us to provide input about the Stony Brook curriculum. And fortunately for us, and there are some major changes are coming down the pike, fortunately for us, our provost, Lejuez, has decided that actually we need to have more of a formal avenue towards our understanding of what general education should be at Stony Brook, and has asked the Undergraduate Council, along with several administrators, to develop a new committee. So we've been heavily involved in setting up this committee that we're calling the General Education Advisory Committee, which again provides a mechanism, a formal mechanism for us to provide suggestions and actually assess and review the Stony Brook curriculum. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that because that's very relevant right now with the big changes afoot regarding SUNY Gen Ed requirements that are actually to be implemented this fall. So I'm going to just quickly go over some of those with you because we have a full agenda, but so that you're aware of what's happening. So on the left here, this table is simply who is on the Undergraduate Council. And I just want to shout out, this is all can be found on the website. You're free to contact anyone there. You don't have to just contact me with any questions you have that are relevant to any undergraduate program that is cross-disciplinary in any way, shape, or form. Okay, it's a shout out to all the ex-official members here that I've pointed out here. These have been vital members to the committee, and I can't thank them enough for the resources they're providing to us. So if we move on and start looking at this GEAC. So what is this? This is this General Education Advisory Committee. And the first thing that we did was we tried to outline the structure, goals, and makeup of this General Education Advisory Committee. It is a joint UGC administrative effort to make the goals for this committee, although the makeup of the committee, shown here on the right, is a variety of people from around the campus, anyone who has an interest in the SBC that represents certain colleges across the units across the campus. And then in the fall of 2022, this was approved by Provost Lejeune, and we were able to get started. So what are the kinds of things that we have been focusing on? And before I do, I just want to remind you, if I go back for 1 minute, how does the Undergraduate Council fit in on this? If you look at this table here, the majority of the members are representing a specific school, but you will see that I and Brenda Anderson are representing the Undergraduate Council, not our individual programs. And the reason why this is so important is that this is a joint group. We're providing constant feedback. We almost in a way think of this as a subgroup of the UGC. It really isn't, because it's more expansive than that, but it is very important that everything that we do in the committee also gets vetted through the Undergraduate Council and back and forth. So it is a symbiotic relationship. And Brenda and I have taken on the role of ensuring that this is happening. Okay, so our focus is on general education at Stony Brook from the broadest scale. That is, what actually are the educational goals of general education, and specifically at Stony Brook, as all the way down to the details of, well, do specific SBC courses learning objectives, do those learning objectives actually fulfill our goals as far as general education? So this is a very broad-based goal. And we started by formulating an inquiry document that outlined the questions that we need to investigate to determine where we are with regards to Gen Ed and where we would like to go. For those of you that were around when the SBC started, it was a very rapid ramp up. There was very little input from the Undergraduate Council on where we want to go, why we're doing this, how it wants to be developed. And we have right now a really shout out to a very transparent administration that really would like to see that joint governance works. So the second thing that we are doing is we're working very closely with the SBC assessment committees and various working groups. And one of the first things that we looked at was the 2019 SBC course assessment, to provide a consensus document outlining what we thought were the problems in both the scope as well as the details of that assessment, so that as the assessment committees move forward, they can see what they can do to, one, make the burden on the faculty less, and two, provide data that's actually usable on many scales. So that's one of the other very important things that we've been working on. But probably the thing that I need to spend most time on, and again, I promised myself that I would make this very short, about 10 minutes, because we have a very packed agenda, is preparing for SUNY's new Gen Ed requirements. Some of you may have heard rumors about that this is coming along, and it is actually something that we have to be worried about because it is effective this fall. So before I hear a lot of panic on this, because I know that there was a lot of panic when we first rolled out the SBCs, because from everything from, well, do we have enough courses to offer the students that they don't have a delay in their graduation? Can we design courses quickly enough, et cetera? So there were a lot of concerns about that. So a couple of things I'm just going to point out again, a lot of details are working through right now. Thankful to the administrative members of our committee, and a particular shout out to Kara Desana, who's done a fantastic job in allowing us to approach this in a logical manner. So some of the big key differences that we're going to have to be looking at is that SUNY is requiring students to complete 30 credits across 7 categories. Remember, we do not have a credit limit for the SBCs, that's formal. There is a hidden credit limit, but there's a formal one that has not been explicated to the students. And basically, SUNY says we need to cover these 4 knowledge and skills areas. Some of these sound very logical. We can split written and oral, which is fine, which is what we do right now. And then an additional 3 can be chosen from these. Remember, this is quite different than what we have right now because the SBCs, they are pretty much taking individual courses in these, or at least if there's a dual certification, courses that cover all of these categories. Then in addition, there are 2 core competencies that have to be covered that are shown here in bold that not necessarily require a specific course and should not be in these additional ones up here, but rather are things that we have to figure out how we are going to cover. And where are the complications in this? Well, there are 2 complications. One I've outlined here is SUNY's expectation is that students should be able to complete this framework, which is shown everything on this page, within the first 60 credits. And remember, we have designed and implemented essentially a 4-year SBC, in other words, our gen ed requirements. So we have to, and SBU must demonstrate a pathway for students to finish these requirements in that timeline. Kara has pointed out that we have to, for the fall, we have to show a good faith effort. But there are some things that we have to consider. So we have to remember that the Stony Brook curriculum exceeds SUNY's 10 category minimum, and most of the students complete at least 19 of the 20 categories. And of course, the lower one is because some of our schools, for example, have dropped the language requirement. But, and the good part is that the SBC generally aligns with the framework, including having versions of all 10 of SUNY's categories. The details, however, are much more complicated, and the UGC is working very hard with the GEAC to work specifically on addressing each of these. So my goal as chair of both committees is to see that how we can minimize the impact on you and on the students. That is how to make this as transparent, this change as transparent as possible. So what we want to be able to do is to maximize the existing and future SBC course compliance, such by aligning the new SUNY Gen Ed requirements, student learning objectives, with those of the SBC. The details are a bit complicated because our SBC requirements have allowed courses to get certified that only satisfy a subset of our SLOs. And we're going to be working through that, trying to change the language in a way that as many of the existing courses will still be in compliance. The second thing is that we have to identify existing course learning outcomes that satisfy these core competencies. Remember, the core competencies are not supposed to be separate courses, but they are to be part of what we already do. I mean, critical reasoning is something that I would say, as a natural scientist, is integral to science. But again, it's a matter of us showing that alignment and hopefully not affecting any of you in any way. And obviously, what we have to do also is consider this 4-year versus 2-year. We have some of our SBC requirements like EXP Plus, STAS Plus, et cetera, that are WRTD that are generally relegated to the later years of study. And there are a variety of ways that we brainstormed that we can still maintain those requirements if we feel that they are important for general education, but remove them from this first 30 credits or the first 60 credits and the 30 credits of requirements. So we're working on all of this right now. So we've hit the ground running. We've made huge progress, and our committee is working really hard to get this all ready for the fall semester in a way where you will not suddenly be told, hey, your course is out of compliance. So anyway, I better stop there because I've given myself the 10 minutes that I wanted to give, and I will go ahead and turn it back over to Richard. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Hannah. I'm going to take questions for you, if I can, from the audience, if there are any, on Zoom or in the audience.
Sure, thank you.
Looks like a Zoom question. Who we got, Rich? Paul. Yes.
Yeah.
Please.
Hannah, just a quick question. So starting these requirements in the fall, is there a sort of grandfathering for students who will be, say, sophomores or juniors this fall?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So it really applies to students who are initiating their education in the fall. Do I have that right?
So we have a problem, and one is that we have to show compliance in this fall. But what we are hoping to do is that we are going to be showing how many of our courses are already in compliance, so that really, as far as the students are concerned, they're continuing on the same path of the SBCs as they always have. So this is part of sort of the nitty gritty that we're working on actively. But yes, so we are going to ensure that no student who's coming in that has come in under the SBCs is going to suddenly see any major changes.
Yeah, it's as you know, in the STEM disciplines, there are often really intensive first and second year courses in discipline, and so cramming all these things also into the first 2 years is going to be a bit of a mess, it seems to me.
Yeah, and Paul, you're bringing up a really important point. That one of the things that I personally think is very important, and that is, we really, yes, we understand we are required to fulfill SUNY's guidelines, but we also have to make it possible for our students not to fall behind. For example, in many of the sciences, if they do not take those fundamental science courses in their freshman and junior year, they're going to be far behind.
Yep.
So we are all going to try to work towards making that possible. The other thing you'll notice, and it went flashed by very fast for you, is that the number of credits that you need are far under 30 to satisfy those categories. So you can replicate categories by major courses. So although they have to take a course that satisfies our equivalent of SNW, their additional science courses will help count towards that 30 credits.
Understood. Thank you.
You bet.
We'll take another question from Sam. I see you up there.
Hi, I'm speaking as the chair of the ANS curriculum committee that encompasses 3 major colleges. I have a quick question. This presentation was extremely helpful and informative for us to do our work as the largest curriculum committee. And I am really grateful they have the best faculty I can imagine in the team. However, I didn't see curriculum committees were represented as ex officio, because we face the challenges. We would be able to report the problem that you could then address. We are going to implement the policies and outcomes of this work. And currently we're in the dark. And I wonder if the Senate does not have a process or policy to include those that who implement the policies in the process, or is it just an oversight? It would be very smart to do so, because we have a number of blind spots and gaps that we have faced. And to address them, you would need people that are running and serving on this curriculum committee, not just mine, all 8 of them.
So I'd like to say thank you very much. In fact, I'm due to go to the next curriculum committee meeting, and you're absolutely right. And I think that it's a very easy thing for us to do, and it's something we must do. And thank you for bringing that up, and that is duly noted.
I also would like to draw the attention of the Senate President to make that as sort of a formal process to do that, so that coordination is key. Without it, we will be siloed, and the policy hand will be different from the practice hand.
Exactly.
The Senate President is hereby notified.
Thank you.
Other questions?
And I will answer on chat anyone who has a chat question, so we don't take any more time.
Okay, Anna, thanks. Thanks
You
for the
bet.
report.
You bet.
Our next much anticipated presentation will be by the VP for Enterprise Risk Management, Larry Zaccarisi, and the Executive Director of MAPS, Kendra Violet, on the recently announced Parking and Mobility Services parking plan. So, Larry, Kendra, take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having us. For those that don't know me, my name is Larry Zaccarisi. I'm the VP for Enterprise Risk Management. Kendra Violet will be joining me shortly. I just want to do a quick primer. So a bit about how we got here before we talk about how we move forward. The process for parking negotiations is enumerated. The authority to do that, as well as the process to move forward, is enumerated in the New York Code of Rules and Regs. So in October of 2021, Stony Brook got permission from the governor's Office of Employer Relations to engage in those conversations. And then that permission was reaffirmed in January of 2022. Obviously, the COVID period sort of precluded some of those discussions. The presentation that you'll see today in various formats, it's sort of been morphing in many ways, but the content remains unchanged, was first presented to the President's Cabinet in April of 2022. To the University Council 2 weeks later, of which Richard is a member. The Stony Brook Council most recently in March of 2023, and just prior to this meeting, the Senate Executive Committee. But on February 10th, 2023, we had our first sit down, if you will, with the various collective bargaining units. And it's important to note that great deference was paid to sitting down with the unions because it is required for us to have a proposal and then to negotiate the rates attached with that proposal. So that is an ongoing process. I had hoped that we could have had that first meeting prior to today. Unfortunately, due to scheduling across the board, you can imagine 7 different collective bargaining units and multiple people involved. So that first meeting is actually scheduled for this Wednesday. That'll be more of a logistics meeting, and we are happy to provide updates that may be pertinent. We're allowed to share throughout, and we'll be happy to return for future meetings. So Kendra joined the university in October of 2021. Enterprise Risk Management took over mobility and parking services in January of 2022, and that kind of gets us to where we are now. So I'm going to turn this over to Kendra. We're going to kind of tag team. She'll start us off, and then I'll finish up, and we'll be happy to take questions at the end.
Thanks, Larry. So one of the things we want to talk about is where are we at currently with our parking operations. So some of the things that have been happening is there was a state audit done in 2019, and they found operational deficits and other things that we needed to address. As part of that, we brought in an outside consultant to take a look at the operations. And obviously they noted several things. One of them was the ongoing capacity issues for both West and East Campus. Now, West Campus, because of COVID, we have seen increased capacity, but on East Campus, we are back at those pre-COVID numbers and some. So we do have capacity issues that are in existence there. We also have delayed maintenance on our parking facilities. So if you're on the East Campus, you've seen the major work that's happening in both the HSC and the hospital garages currently. And we do need to address our surface parking lots. And taking a look at part of this process has been a facility review to say where do we need to spend the next several years redoing our parking. And then the last thing is really the consultants took a look and surveyed the students and the faculty staff, and 45% of them had a negative or very negative experience with parking. And those are not numbers that we want to see. Parking, and I say this and I know it's cliche, but parking is the welcome mat and the last goodbye for anyone coming to our campus. So first impression, last impression. So if we're not doing our job there, that has an impact on everybody's experience with the university. This is supposed, there we go. So taking a look at our funding. So we are self-funded operation, and from a forecast perspective, if we made no changes to our operation, then we are projected to be at an $11 million deficit in FY 26-27. Now, we did meet with the Executive Council before this meeting, and they had some questions about what went into that number. And so there are several factors of it. We have our operational expenses, which obviously operational expenses have been rising, as many of you have probably experienced, and we have not kept up with that from a revenue perspective. So you have that piece of it. Operational expenses include things like snow removal. It includes general maintenance with, line striping, pothole repairs. office expenses, all of those things are part of the operation. So all of that, as well as the projects that were happening currently on East Campus, so projects A, B, and C for the garages, that is a $30 million project. Luckily, we have negotiated with the hospital. They're allowing us to pay them back over 20 years. So if we had not been able to do that, that number would actually look very different from what it looks like right now, even more so in the red. So the piece of that too, and this is one thing I wanted to clarify, because after they asked the question, I went back and looked at it again, is that part of this number did include projects that we know need to happen in our other facilities, whether it's lighting upgrades, repaving lots. So that's a 5-year plan of what we know we need to do over the next 5 years. So that is included in here. That has not been part of our operational expenses in the past. So we wanted to make sure that was shown in there because quite honestly, the work needs to get done. So how do we solve the issues that we have? So step by step, number one, let's take a look at the organization. Bringing East and West Campus back together and moving forward with one holistic approach from a parking and transportation or mobility and parking perspective. So part of that, it's not just East and West bringing it together, it's bringing enforcement from UPD under parking, it's bringing the permit sales and customer service facing underneath parking as well, which currently lives in financial services. So bringing all of those operations together, and in addition, bringing on new transit staff. So in other words, and from transit, I'm talking transportation demand management. So someone who can look holistically at the microtransit and other solutions. Our partnerships with LIRR, our partnerships with Suffolk County. How can we increase bike share options? How can we look at our infrastructure to support biking to campus? Looking at how we can support e-scooters on campus. Looking at the connection between East and West. So really taking, again, that holistic look from a university perspective at our transit and our parking. So then the second piece was technologies. Larry says I always put this kindly, but we're at end of life with our technologies. So from an enforcement standpoint, the technology we're using is no longer supported by the company that we get it from. And so there's a lot of information that we just don't have access to, or our officers don't have access to. And then looking at our permitting sales, it's a homegrown system. That system does not allow us any flexibility to be able to do some of the things that a cutting edge premier university should be doing. Taking a look at daily parking options for faculty staff because they are working a hybrid model. So right now we're kind of pigeonholed into that. You have a permit, you don't have a permit, or you pay the meter or you pay the daily rate in the garage. There's not a lot of flexibility there. Our pay stations and our meter lots, taking a look at those to say, again, those need to be updated, giving the ability for departments to be able to have codes so when they bring a visitor to campus, they can give that visitor a code so that visitor doesn't have to pay for the parking. And that way you don't have to worry about getting a paper pass from us to get into somebody's hands when they come to visit. So that also talks about events. You're bringing a group to campus for an event, looking at mobile payment options. So if you are parking at a meter space, you can pay with your phone. It can send you notification that it's expiring. So if you can't make it back, you can extend the time. So all of these things, putting it in place to really increase the service to everyone coming to campus. And then the last piece of it is, again, we need to address the operational needs of the parking services, but also these new technologies and things that we need to bring in. And so part of that plan is to do a paid model for all faculty, staff, and students. So we did put up here what our proposed model was. And again, I cannot stress this enough. This is a proposal. This has to go through a process of negotiation. We went with a tiered model because we felt like it offered individuals multiple options from a payment rate. So from that perspective, if you look at, we did have basically 4 tiers plus the residential. So your premium are your garages, and then the reserved lots. The core would be any parking lot inside Circle Road. Perimeter is any parking lot adjacent to campus outside Circle Road. We also took into consideration the hospital. So we looked at Staff Lot A and AmSurge as being that perimeter rate. We could probably have made Staff Lot A core because of its proximity to the hospital, but we chose to go with the perimeter rate in our calculations there. And then the satellite would be Lot 40 and out at RSS. And again, offering that lowest cost option. So we wanted to take a look at our peer institutions. One of the first things we benchmarked were the AAUs. We took out any private and we took out the urban institutions for comparison. So when we take a look at it, on the left-hand side, you will see the student rate benchmarking. And from this perspective, at our maximum rate, 53% of the schools were higher. At a minimum rate, 87% of our peer institutions had a higher minimum rate than we were proposing. And then from the faculty staff perspective, that becomes 83% and 87% as well. So then we took a look at the SUNYs, and we wanted to look at university centers. So that would be the Albany, Buffalo, and Binghamton. Binghamton is the only campus that has a garage as well. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you look at these rates. And then from that perspective, we also wanted to look at an Old Westbury, a Long Island institution and what they were doing. And you'll see a mix. Some places charge a registration fee for vehicles, some charge parking fees. It's really hard to compare campuses from a parking perspective because it's all going to depend number of spaces, what your mix of garages versus your surface lots, all of those things play into that factor.
So then for 2 reasons, thank you, Kendra, both for the comparison for health science centers and hospitals, as well as the recency with which these were negotiated or the rates were agreed to. So if you look up top, the SUNY Upstate, neither of them had registration fees, Upstate and Downstate. The garage parking monthly rates, and this varies by collective bargaining unit, range from $70 to almost $100. And the surface lot is on campus. So surface lot parking would be, like Kendra said, a lot 40 or old H lot, things like that. That's from $34 up to $61. And in Upstate, they actually have remote, what they call shuttle lots, where currently there's a local agreement in place where those rates are suspended until October 2023. However, the projection is that those off-campus lots will be $24 a month, which will require folks to take a shuttle from that location to campus, anywhere from 3/4 of a mile to about mile 0.8, mile 0.7. And as I mentioned, those were last agreed to and updated in October 2014. However, there's a baked-in 1% escalation. So the rates you see there are the rates as of today. And then SUNY Downstate had a similar situation to us where in that case, they actually had to take down their garage, but there was several degrees of disrepair in their facilities, and it required them to renegotiate those rates in 2019, which were effective in 2020. And that's a local MOU between the unions you see there, so UUP, PEF, CSEA, NYSCOBA, GSEU, and it was effective as of January 1st, 2020. And those are from annual fees of around $360 a year for garage and $160 for surface lots. You see where they are now. It's $210 per month for a garage and $150 per month for what will be considered surface lots compared to where the rates that we showed you before. So where do we go from here? I already mentioned that the formal process with the unions is underway with that first logistics meeting between the unions and labor relations scheduled for this Wednesday. We have been and continue to receive feedback while some of it has waned. When we rolled out our campus-wide email, parking changes at stonybrook.edu was a way for us to solicit feedback from students, faculty, staff, patients, visitors, and anyone who had an opinion about parking. We did get a great deal of feedback, much of which we've actually taken back, and we're looking to partner more closely, as an example, with the Long Island Railroad. There was an example of, well, can you provide a shuttle from Ronkonkoma train station to Stony Brook, because the frequency at Ronkonkoma is much greater. And that, we thank Andrew Solagreco for that recommendation, and that's something that we take back, and we're working on our relationships with the Long Island Railroad are long existing. Same as with Brookhaven Town. As well as with Suffolk County Transit. For those that don't know, Suffolk County Transit buses already run on our campus. So to the extent that we can continue to press into our mass transit and get more, either removing the number of vehicles or pushing folks towards mass transit. Concerns about the changing the enforcement hours, what happens when we move lots from what that looks like. And again, we're taking all that feedback in, and all of that will be part of the discussions and what the plan ultimately looks like after those negotiations. Concerns from students and from USG, and Kendra's been working extensively with our student groups to finalize a student advisory group through USG, and that's in the final throes of happening. And then ultimately, as has been mentioned really extensively here, we need technology. We can't even support the current system that we have. And in order for us to be able to provide that premier level of service, we have a need to do that now in anticipation of whatever changes may come. So I know we went through that a lot. There's a ton of information actually on the Mobility and Parking Services website. This plan and the information is up there. And to the extent that we have some time here, we're happy to take some questions, and also happy to take them offline as well.
All right, questions? Andrew.
Thank you both so much. Larry, I'm going to be appealing to you as someone I know who is decent, compassionate, among the best administrators I've ever worked with in my career. And I really mean that.
The feeling's mutual. I'm not sure what the question's going to be, but the feeling's still mutual.
It's going to be a tough question. And Kendra, I appreciated your presentation. I fully accept it costs what you say it does. And I particularly like the part of your presentation where you said this is not a done deal. The coin has not even been flipped, let alone had the time to land on the floor. So two basic ideas in the service of brainstorming. And this is said, I don't know, I haven't really talked to a lot of colleagues about this other than I was at the rally, I believe in the rally. It's not that the prices are going up, it's that they're going up to an absurd level given what people can handle right now. Downstate is Brooklyn. I mean, it's apples and oranges. So two ideas I'd like you to think about, and in a sort of collective shared decision-making process. The tiers that you had were in categories of what you're getting for that service. I'd like to propose that tiers be thought about in terms of what people can pay. And one guideline for that is what they're making. So maybe employees that make less or under a threshold will, not have to pay as much. So I don't think it should be a flat rate. It's the same problem we have with flat taxes. That's big suggestion number one. Big suggestion number two, I think we should have a town hall, and the kind of town hall where the audience gets to speak a lot, where we have a big list of all the areas in which we could, in service of brainstorming, nothing is permanent, potentially cut money so that we don't have to go in deep into the pockets of people that can't afford it. Nobody can really afford this right now. Inflation is killing a lot of folks that work here. I just think we need to get together. I mean, I won't mention the things that I think we spend a lot of money on that we need not do so. I've done that in this body before. But I think we should have a couple serious budget discussions as a group to think about how we might save money elsewhere so this doesn't have to be quite so painful. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
We have a number of folks on Zoom, but I just want to summarize some of the items in the chat. There's been a lot of questions similar to what Andrew just brought up with salary scaled, a number of items talking about why not charge for registration fees rather than monthly fees. It's going to impact grad students and students more so than it will faculty. So a lot of questions in there. We'll get those out to you. But we have Paul Bingham on chat, first person to raise his hand.
Before we do that, Larry, could you make clear what you made clear to the Senate Executive Committee, that being an IFR and governed by SUNY means that we're not allowed to actually take this money, if I'm understanding you correctly, from other parts of the university budget? Please.
Thank you, Rich. That's correct. So, and I'm remiss in not stating that we're learning from all the presentations and questions that come up, but that's an important one. So the fact that we are, the financial model is run as an income fund reimbursable account is a SUNY requirement. We don't have the luxury of making those changes. And again, I made the presumption, but I'm pretty certain that would actually require an act of the Board of Trustees to change how that model actually works.
Okay, Rich. Rich, you want to call on people? Paul Bingham. Paul.
Yeah, hi, thanks. Just two quick technical questions. So when do you expect the new system to go into place? And for those of us who currently have automatically annually renewed garage parking permits, will we have the opportunity to renew those at the new prices when the system goes into place?
So two great questions. The first is not so easily answered. It depends on how the negotiations go. Everything will be dictated by the collective bargaining and labor relations negotiations. And yes to the second question.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Stacy.
Yes, hi, thanks for this presentation. Larry and Violet, I was just curious, there are a lot of equity issues that I think are raised by the plan, including how people who have chronic health conditions and mobility issues will be charged for needing to be able to access parking close to their offices. There are folks in the chat who are raising, salary related equity considerations. Our adjuncts aren't paid very much, and this is essentially a significant chunk of adjunct related pay. So I'm just curious how your office or your team thought about equity concerns, and to what extent Dr. Brown-Clark's, and her team, the diversity officer team, how those groups were involved in this conversation, or whether you'll engage them further to address some of these really serious equity concerns.
So yes to the answer to the question of the CDO's office being involved and being aware of the plan and some of the nuances. And we greatly appreciate the ADA concerns, and that's a ton of the feedback that we've gotten. And Kendra is working very closely on that. And we continue to want to hear concerns that may be specific to individuals or groups. And that's part of the feedback that's wanted, and I think is a part how we can continue to modify the logistics of the proposal as it relates to the rates and ultimately what those fees look like. I don't want to sound like I'm repeating myself, but I want to be very clear that those are going to be the subject of negotiation. And while there were many different models that were looked at based on salary ranges, and believe me, Kendra has spreadsheets all over her walls and her floors in her office, and we think we've presented the most efficient model overall for us to provide the service that's needed for the campus, and those fees will be subject to the negotiation.
A couple more questions on Zoom. We have Hannah.
Thank you, Larry. Again, for both of you, actually, so one of the biggest concerns I have, and I think it's been, mirrored here quite readily, is that this is essentially a salary cut at a time when graduate students specifically have already been struggling immensely. I just had this past week, one of my graduate students say, I'm leaving. I cannot live here anymore. My landlord just raised my rent $1,000 a month. And any kind, there are no choices for these students other to live as far away from Stony Brook as they can, because it's becoming impossible for them to live within biking distance. Many of them find that if they try to live along a train route, it's too expensive. So we're having graduate students having to move out to places like Selden and so forth, and they are totally dependent upon a car. They have no other choices. When you have urban campuses, there are many other choices. So it's really, when you consider the rates, please remember that our subset of students, particularly, I'm going to say there are a lot of undergrads in the same situation, but the grad students already are being paid so little to survive in this area. And this is really going to, in many cases, break the back of the students. These are post-tax dollars, and it reduces what's already an unlivable wage. You guys try to live on $35,000 a year in this area, and now you add anything more to it, and others will be like me, where the students just say, I can no longer afford this anymore. And how will our graduate program survive when we have this? How will our undergraduate program survive if the poorest among our students can't afford to be here anymore because they have to drive? They cannot live near enough to a train station, take the train. And we all know that if you're poor enough to live far enough away from Stony Brook, riding a bicycle is out of the question. So please just be mindful as you're setting rates to understand that this has ripples, enormous ripples for our student population. Thank you.
We have time for a couple more questions. John, you're up, and then we have one from the audience. John True?
Hi, yeah, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I have a longer statement I will paste in the chat that's developed by members of my department. And basically, it talks about how we need a holistic solution that integrates conservation and sustainability with accessibility and equity. And so it has to be Stony Brook integrating with its community, the town, and the county to develop an integrated transportation solution. I'm very happy that some aspects of this were mentioned. I just pasted the whole statement into the chat, just in interest of time. So thanks for the time. I appreciate it.
Tom Wilson.
Hi there. Good afternoon. You're going to hear these questions again, but as these comments again, but as they say on Jeopardy, they're going to be in the form of a question. So first of all, a comment. You're trying to do several things at once, and one of the things you could do to make this an easier, simpler, perhaps better process is to implement. You can implement paid parking without removing the separation between commuter students and faculty staff. And it's very difficult for some faculty staff, if a lot's completely buried by students and then faculty or staff have to go and come and go, that becomes very difficult. So that's a different thing. So you can think about maybe doing that later or reorganizing the lots later. Start with a paid model. The two questions are, I guess the question is, can we get detailed financials and IFR rate sheets? Because I have a feeling that a lot of the budget is deferred maintenance on the garages. And as a matter of equity and perhaps even as allowed by IFR regulations, I've run IFRs for 40 years, you may not be able to use funds from surface lots, for example, to pay expenses for garages. I know that when I do IFR accounts and rates, you have to be very careful not to third-party costs from one item to another. The third one is, there's a lot of questions, and there's only so much you can do in this kind of a forum, and the feedback is good, but it's not widely shared and it's not after the fact. So I would like to ask if you would reestablish the Parking Advisory Board, where the Senate had representatives, students, I believe, the Senate represented students, but we can have student representatives, have wide representation, maybe push the reset button a little bit and talk about the challenges. We might have some good ideas to add to them. So thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Folks, I'm sorry, but that's all the time we really have for this issue. Sorry, yeah, I know, yeah.
That's crazy. It's unfair. It's unfair. This is a big issue. This needs to be discussed.
It is an important issue. I understand that, but we also
And I don't get to speak. I don't get to speak.
We have other items on the agenda, yes.
Yeah, those are very important items, I'm sure. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, please do reach out, send an email, contact, talk to.
I'll say it into the microphone again. Parking changes at stonybrook.edu, all one word. As I mentioned to the executive committee earlier, while There were a lot of pieces of feedback coming in early. They've since sort of tapered off, but we're happy to have them tick back up, and we value your feedback. So thank you. And thank you for having us.
300% increase is absolutely unfair and unwarranted. Just had to throw that in.
Okey doke, thank you. No, sorry. So the next item on our agenda is a requested report by the CEO, the Senior Vice President of Health Sciences, CEO, Dr. Hal Paz. Dr. Paz, on things going on in Stony Brook Medicine. We haven't had such a report for a while, and we asked for one. Thanks, Hal.
Thanks very much, Richard. Appreciate the opportunity and the invitation. I provided a written report, and given the time, I'll just summarize briefly some of the high points of the report. And let me begin, importantly, with some of the awards that our faculty on the East Campus have received. At the Renaissance School of Medicine, Dr. Judith Crowell in psychiatry and Dr. Lawrence Hurst in orthopedics were promoted to SUNY Distinguished Service Professors. Dr. Benita Fries was named a Fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. On match day at the Renaissance School of Medicine, 121 School of Medicine students were successfully matched, and 59%, importantly, have decided to stay in New York State to continue their residency training. 32 students matched into our Stony Brook Medicine program, so they'll be staying here to complete their residency. That's 22% of the entire class. And I'm pleased to point out that that's the highest number in the last 5 years. It speaks volumes about our hospitals and the residency training programs. Also importantly, and this is a huge national issue, 21% of our residents, of our students will be going into primary care specialties. This is important because of the national shortage of physicians in areas ranging from 21,000 to 55,000 physicians over the next decade alone. In addition to that, Stony Brook hospitals match with students from SUNY schools as well as graduates of other U.S. medical schools granting MD and DO degrees in large numbers. At the School of Health Professions, Dr. Ahmad, Director of the Clinical Education and Clinical Assessment Program in Laboratory Sciences, received Best Poster Award at the 17th Annual Women in Medicine Research Day. In addition to that, this event raises awareness for issues women face in medical training, healthcare, and research, and highlights the achievements of women in these fields. Dean Stacy Jaffe Gropak, Dean of the School of Health Professions, received the 2023 SUNY FACT Excellence Award in Administrative Leadership across the SUNY system. Also in the school, the Commission of Accreditation of Athletic Training Education granted the Master of Science program in athletic training the maximum possible 10 years of continuing accreditation, the only program in the entire Long Island area with this accreditation. And finally, in the School of Health Professions, the school hosted more than 300 students, faculty, and staff at their second annual Interprofessional Education Day, where they worked to foster interprofessional teams across the health sciences with a particular focus on ethics and values. The School of Dental Medicine conducted a research day supporting students and faculty who placed first in the American Dental Association Student Poster Award competition. 39 members of the class of 2023 sought residency programs and successfully matched. And after earning their Doctor of Dental Surgery degree this May, several of our 2023 graduates will proceed with their graduate training here at Stony Brook. And then finally, in the School of Social Welfare, the school hosted an open house luncheon on March 21st in honor of Social Work Month and to celebrate the hardworking social workers, of which there are 160 working at Stony Brook University, Stony Brook University Hospital, and the Long Island Veterans Home. The School of Social Welfare and the School of Nursing held their second interprofessional simulation education event in February for both undergraduate and graduate students. Both nursing and social work students worked together at the School of Nursing Simulation Center. And this is, again, an opportunity to foster interprofessional health science education. Let me just shift gears for a few minutes to talk about some new initiatives going on across the East Campus and at Stony Brook Medicine. So first is the Center for Healthy Aging. President McGinnis has given her support for a proposal to create a Center for Healthy Aging in the Renaissance School of Medicine. As the baby boomer generation ages, the number of older people is rapidly increasing and the gap between geriatric patients and geriatric specialists is widening. Suffolk County across New York State has the most advanced elderly population in the state, and these needs are particularly important here, but quite frankly, across the country and around the world. 1 of 6 New Yorkers is age 65 or older, and this is an increase of 26% over the past decade. The median age in Suffolk County is 42 years of age, 10% higher than the national average. And there are huge opportunities for us to begin with basic and translational and clinical research, understanding opportunities to provide health and well-being for a growing elderly population around the world. The center is an exciting new initiative that will marshal the considerable strengths of the Renaissance School of Medicine, the health science schools, and Stony Brook University as a whole to create a preeminent center for aging research and education, not only here in Long Island, but across the nation. In addition to that, I want to mention the work going on around the consideration of the School of Public Health. After conducting an internal review by faculty both on the East and West campuses, and with President McGinnis's approval, we are now moving forward with additional study on the creation of a School of Public Health. As you all know, we have an outstanding program in public health, fully accredited here at Stony Brook University. So in addition to the self-study that was conducted by the faculty, which supported moving forward with the consideration for a School of Public Health, we're currently conducting an internal financial analysis to look at the financial feasibility of moving forward with the school, as well as engaging Huron, a national consulting firm, to help us conduct a business analysis. In addition to that, we've invited 3 external public health school deans to visit and to offer their opinion on the feasibility of creating a School of Public Health from our graduate program in public health. And these include Sandro Galea, who's currently Dean of the School of Public Health at Boston University, Donna Peterson, Dean at the University of South Florida, and Perry Halkitis, who's the Dean at the Rutgers School of Public Health. Moving to the hospitals, I just want to mention that the Stony Brook University Quality Assessment Review Board met last month. This board was repopulated back in 2022 after the pandemic. They are chartered to look at this, quality as well as programs in health, strategy, and transformation at Stony Brook University and report to the SUNY Board of Trustees. The QARB is made up of members both locally and nationally with expertise in healthcare and quality. Our East End hospitals continue to do a great deal of work, again, in this post-pandemic world. On the East End, work is underway to raise funds necessary to build a new hospital for the Southampton Hospital, and ground will be breaking next month for the creation of the Stony Brook Southampton Hospital Satellite Emergency Facility in East Hampton, a much-needed facility for those far out on the East End who require emergency services and during the summer months have a great deal of difficulty traveling to Southampton. We're continuing to move forward with strategic planning within Stony Brook Medicine. Liz Popwell, our Chief Strategy and Transformation Officer, working with faculty and staff as well as leadership at Stony Brook Medicine, are continuing to move forward. They recently sent out a survey to gather input from faculty and staff on the East Campus on mission, vision, and values. The plan is to complete the strategic plan by June of this year. And of course, this strategic plan will dovetail into the university-wide strategic plan, which is also underway. A couple of recruitments. We recently recruited a new Chief Communications and Marketing Officer for Stony Brook Medicine. Tim Brown will be starting later this month. He comes to us from the University of Chicago Medicine, where he was the deputy in charge of a similar role there. We're delighted that he'll be joining us with 30 years of experience and expertise. In addition to that, the search for a cancer center director, which I previously reported on, continues to move forward. 3 outstanding candidates have been identified by the search committee, and we're currently organizing visits for these candidates. Again, I want to thank Dr. Youssef Hanoun for his outstanding leadership of the Stony Brook Cancer Center over the past decade. And then finally, we're also conducting a search for our Chief Administrative Officer for the Southampton Hospital. This national search is also underway as Mr. Bob Schallner departs this summer from his role. That completes my report, and I'd be pleased to take any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Do we have questions? I wonder if you might tell us a bit of what's happening with Catholic Health Services. And we were working on some kinds of agreements with them. Where is that now?
Oh, that's an excellent question. So we are continuing our work with Catholic Health, continuing conversations. A number of administrators, leaders, faculty, and staff at Stony Brook Medicine are meeting with counterparts at Catholic Health. I had a conversation with their CEO last Friday, and we're continuing to engage on identifying opportunities for partnership and collaboration here on Long Island.
Thank you.
No questions so far from Zoom. I have a question though for you. What's the progress of the Lake Grove facility?
Yes, so the Lake Grove facility is literally ready to open later this month. We are working through a few last-minute zoning issues and approval issues with the Department of Health. But our plan is to begin moving clinical facilities into that building later in the month of April. It is a beautiful facility, and we're planning on having a ribbon cutting in July to officially open the building.
I have another general question, if I may. As one travels down Route 347, pretty much every third building seems to have a Northwell sticker on it, or maybe Cancer Centers of Long Island. Does this kind of development of these other medical facilities, is this a threat to us? Is this something we need to worry about? I'm just curious about the landscape and the future and so on as you see it.
Sure. I would mention also that there are about 230 Stony Brook Medicine sites across Long Island, and they too have their stickers and signs out front. You know, it's important to remember that many of the practices where you see those logos are in fact practices that existed here on Long Island. But then as we're seeing nationally, they've been acquired by some large system. And that's part of the evolution of medicine and the evolution of healthcare. When I graduated medical school in 1982, roughly 80% of physicians went into private practice. Today, it's the exact inverse. 80% of physicians now are employed in some large group by either a hospital or by a large multi-specialty practice, and now even by companies like Amazon and CVS and Walgreens. That's the national trend, and that's part of what we're seeing. In terms of the competitiveness, if you walk over to our hospital on any given day, we're full. Many individuals tell us that they'd like to be a patient anywhere on Long Island, and they find they have waits that they've experienced. And I referenced earlier the shortage of physicians that we're experiencing here in New York State and nationally. This is a huge issue. The challenge we have actually is finding ways to provide more care. I would argue that there are, going to continue to be opportunities in terms of how we organize it and how we even take advantage of new technologies like artificial intelligence and robotics to make it as effective as we possibly can. But at the same time, we don't take your question lightly. And we think that we must continue to be exceptionally strategic in thinking about our future. And that's why this strategic planning process is so important, not just completing it this year, but implementing that plan and aligning that with our future plans for facilities as well as recruiting physicians. And one of the pieces of very positive feedback we've received is from the East End, from both hospitals on the East End. and the receptiveness that they've seen from the leadership at Stony Brook Medicine to work collaboratively with them to recruit more physicians to areas that have some very significant shortage of not only primary care doctors, but also specialists.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for your report.
Appreciate the opportunity.
As the Senate heard, there was an addition to the agenda in the area of old business made by President Ken Lindblom, President of the ANS Senate. Ken, could you come up and state what the request was, and we'll give then the provost a chance to say whether he wants to respond to it at this point or later in his remarks, please.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, President Larson. So you may recall that the provost and the executive vice president a couple of months ago sent out a message to the community regarding a social media post that was posted by one of our faculty colleagues. And the memo claimed that the post itself was inappropriate and made some other judgments about the post. The Arts and Sciences Senate Executive Committee, through the Senate Executive Committee, made a request to the provost that the sentence judging that social media post be eliminated, because it's our thought that that's the memo, but that sentence in particular was inappropriate, and also that it has created a chill on the freedom of speech on campus. The Senate Executive Committee did meet with the provost a number of weeks ago. It might be a month or a little bit more, and he did say he would get back to us. We haven't heard back yet, but I wanted to raise this as an issue today to give both the EVP and the provost the opportunity to respond today if they're ready, and if not, just that we keep it on the agenda until we hear back. Thank you.
Provost Lejoy, are you prepared to talk about this now or in your remarks? Okay, all right. So it's on the agenda, and it will be addressed in Provost Lejoy's remarks. That's John True had a bit of new business, but I think, John, you've put the statement that you wanted to make from Ecology and Evolution in the chat, so I'm not sure you need to rediscuss it now. Do you wish to?
That's correct. The whole statement is in the chat.
Okie doke. Thanks very much. We had one other item of new business, which is a resolution related to the point that President Lindblom has just made. A resolution in defense of free speech and academic freedom at SBU by one of our senators, Allegra De Laurentiis. It was, I believe, circulated to the entire membership. It is on the agenda for discussion, but before that, we'll have Allegra, if she's here, I think she is, present the amendment to the Senate body. Allegra? Sorry, the resolution.
Please remove your mask. Oh, thank you. Sorry. So, as you can read there, this is a can you hear me? Yeah. This is a resolution pertaining to what was just mentioned 2 minutes ago. It's called In Defense of Free Speech and Academic Freedom at Stony Brook University. And here it goes. I'm just going to read it quickly because we don't have time. Whereas in January 2023, the university publicly rebuked the protected speech of a faculty member, Dr. Anna Hayward, after she posed questions regarding the fatal police shooting of Mr. Enrique Lopez in Suffolk County, one among several such fatal shootings currently being investigated by the New York State Attorney General. Whereas the decision by the university to publicly rebuke the protected speech of our colleague took place within 24 hours of a public demand by the Police Benevolent Association that the university take this step. Whereas the university's public rebuke took place with full knowledge that Dr. Hayward had been doxxed That means that her personal information had been exposed with the intention to shame and intimidate her, and that she was receiving online threats from people purporting to speak on behalf of the Police Benevolent Association and Suffolk County Police. Whereas many Police Benevolent Association supporters explicitly demanded that Stony Brook University monitor course content with regards to policing, whereas the provost publicly stated at the February 7th, 23 University Senate meeting that the decision to rebuke this faculty member was motivated by a desire to protect her and the SBU community. Indeed, following the university's public statement, the threats ceased, raising the appearance of a quid pro quo in which the university aimed at appeasing complaints from an external institution, here the Suffolk County PBA. Whereas the AAUP provides resources, including draft policies to upholding free speech and academic freedom that have been adopted by many other academic institutions. Whereas the university's decision to publicly rebuke one faculty member's speech raises concerns about academic freedom on this campus, it also weakens the university's ability to hire and retain diverse faculty and faculty with expertise in policing and incarceration. For example, this may undermine the search for a director for the Center for Changing Systems of Power or the recruitment of IDEA postdoctoral fellows in the future. Be it resolved that the Senate asks the SBU administration to publicly express support for the free speech and academic freedom of Dr. Hayward, reversing its former public rebuke and discreditation. Be it resolved that the Senate asks Stony Brook University to develop, in collaboration with the Senate itself, a policy to protect and safeguard the right to free speech and the academic freedom of faculty, students, and staff, taking into account policy models at other institutions and recommendations from the AAUP. Be it resolved that the Senate asks Stony Brook University to develop or review, in consultation with the Senate and competent members of the university community, its policies regarding the university's use of social media. Indeed, the public rebuke and its consequences for our colleague began with a public post by the university featuring a story about the excellent, indeed, medical care received at Stony Brook Hospital by two policemen wounded in the incident, while minimizing the death of Mr. Enrique Lopez that resulted from their intervention. Be it resolved that the Senate asks the Stony Brook Stony Brook University develop, in consultation with the Senate, procedures to protect all members of the community from vilification and threats emanating from or on behalf of external agencies, for example, the Suffolk County Police Department. In particular, the Senate asks for plans to address security concerns and to seek protection for university employees by agencies other than the Suffolk County Police Department, such as the Attorney General. Finally, be it resolved that the University Senate asks President Maury McInnes, whose silence on this case is raising concerns among faculty, staff, and students, to publicly address the above points, providing her vision and guidance for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Allegra. Resolutions to the Senate require a second. Do I hear a second? Second. Motion is second. The motion is now open for discussion from the floor and from our colleagues on Zoom. Would anyone like to speak, I'll say initially, in support of the motion?
Hello, everybody. I'm the president of GSU, Graduate Student Employees Union. And even though we don't have voting rights as of yet in the University Senate, I would like to express GSU's support for the resolution. We believe it's a very important issue, and also it impacts grad students a lot, and who sometimes don't even have the protection of tenure. And I would encourage all members of the Senate to vote in favor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Was that Miriam on Zoom who had unmuted?
Can we switch to the, okay. Is Miriam Rafalovich?
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead, Miriam. You wanted to speak?
Just briefly, I just express my support, and I think, especially for the sake of diversity and inclusion and just freedom of expression, this is a very murky situation that occurred, and I think it's really important that the university come out with a very clear directive in terms of what needs to be done and protection of free speech. That's all.
Thank you.
I strongly
Jonathan.
support this. Thank you.
I strongly support this resolution. At a time when we see a regression of freedoms of expression, reporters' freedoms, and the general marketplace of ideas throughout the world, I think it behooves us to pay attention to things that have long been established in American academic settings. I'm thinking particularly of the statement from 1967 from the University of Chicago. Let me quote just one paragraph. The mission of the university is the discovery, improvement, and dissemination of knowledge. Its domains of inquiry and scrutiny include all aspects and all values of society. A university faithful to its mission will provide enduring challenges to social values, policies, practices, and institutions. By design and by effect, it is the institution which creates discontent with the existing social arrangement and proposes new ones. In brief, a good university like Socrates will be upsetting. We need to be upsetting without the intrusion of the police or the police state.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yes. Come to the microphone over there, please. Thanks very much.
Hi, my name is Amy Hammock, and I'm a faculty member in the School of Social Welfare and in the program in Public Health. And I just want to say that I am in support of this measure as well. Anna is a very close friend of mine and also a really beloved colleague. And seeing what she went through made me very scared for what we could all go through. And I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Others? Excuse me? All right, if there are no, do we need a formal resolution to close discussion, or can we proceed directly to the vote? Then we will proceed directly to the vote. Rich will put up the poll, the resolution polling on Zoom, accept, reject, abstain. So just click on the relevant one. For senators in the audience.
Richard,
Yes.
I'm afraid, did you open a suggestion and invite people who dissented? I only heard you talk about people who.
I asked for speakers either for, against the, or against the motion.
Okay, I didn't hear that part. Thank you. Want to make sure that everybody gets represented here.
Yes, I understand entirely. And it's all quiet on Zoom.
So since there were no amendments posted.
No amendments have been suggested, no amendments have been posted. So Allegra doesn't have to respond on that point, and we can go directly. We can go directly to voting.
Just to answer the question in the chat, yes, senators are the only ones who can vote. In the room, senators, we do need to take a hand count as well. So we're looking for the three options that are presented: endorse, not endorse, or abstain. So if we can just get a hand count from folks in the room for endorse.
You Stalinist.
Okay, thank you. A hand count in the room for not endorse.
We have one.
And a hand count in the room for abstain. Any remaining senators in the room? All the rest. Thank you.
Okey doke, thanks very much for that. We will now take brief remarks by the president and the provost in that order. President McInnes.
Good afternoon, everyone. As you know, this is budget season in Albany. And you may also have noticed that the budget is normally supposed to be completed by April 1, and yet there's no news story yet. So that means they have blown past their deadline, and we still wait. So here's what's going on. I spent time again last week in Albany, meeting again with congressional leaders. It was the first time that the chancellor, president of Stony Brook, president of Binghamton, provost at Albany, and head of government relations for Buffalo all went together to meet with the chairs of higher education from Assembly and Senate, the head of the Senate, the speaker in individual meetings, as well as members of the staff of Ways and Means, as well as members of staff from the governor's office. What I can tell you is we have a chancellor who is enormously supportive of the university centers and of what Governor Hochul has put forth in her budget proposal related to supporting the university centers. That was a comprehensive package of money to support an endowment match for money that is raised philanthropically to go into our endowment, for extra capital in support of what you all know across our campus is an extremely large deferred maintenance budget, money for IT, which we also know here are systems that are failing, and many are at end-of-life product, as well as a proposed tuition increase over the next 5 years to support the every year costs that we have as a flagship institution. The Assembly and the Senate put forward different proposals, but all kind of in the same spirit, all of which we're recognizing for the first time in more than a decade that you cannot tell higher education institutions that your tuition's flat, your funding is flat, you have salary increases you need to meet, and you have a whole bunch of other things that we're going to tell you you have to do every year, and that you're going to just do this out of nothing. So it's a really excitingly different set of conversations that we've been able to have on my trips to Albany and my many meetings with legislators. So we don't know what's going to come out of all of this, but every single person we've talked to says we understand we have to support higher education this year. So we will see. We're hopeful. There are betting pools that you can get in on if you want as to when this budget's going to be done. I don't know. I'm not in one of those betting pools, but there's maybe that's how we'll solve our budget problem here. So that's where we are. Fingers crossed. There was certainly a lot of talk in the halls by the staffers that their hope is that it would be done before the spring holiday seasons. Passover begins Wednesday, Easter is on Sunday. I think there's a hopefulness that it will get finished before then, but we will see. On Governor's Island, it's really close. Team Still Weekly in there every Tuesday, sitting down with the trust, spending a lot of time with them, working on little details at this point. They plan to announce the winner of the competition on April 22nd, which is Earth Day. We remain very hopeful. I will say one of the most exciting things that has come out of all of this is that we are now sitting down with major philanthropic entities to talk about what we're doing on Governor's Island around climate change, around sustainable finance, around policy change. And these are conversations we would not be having. And it's also made them very interested in Stony Brook as well. Stony Brook is an institution, and those conversations are not just about Governor's Island, they are also about us. So this has been a really exciting development that has come out of our work, really amazing work that has gone on by so many people, both faculty and staff on this campus. I remain really hopeful that we will be named as the anchor institution for this exciting proposal, and that this very broad, cross-disciplinary work is the way that we will tackle other grand challenges in our future. In the spirit of keeping comments brief, a couple things very quickly. We have our next presidential lecture on April 27th. It is Raj Chetty. I would really encourage our campus community to be there. Chetty was one of the economists that really began our national conversations about the role of higher education in intergenerational socioeconomic mobility. It, of course, highlighted Stony Brook's role as a national leader in that space. His work continues on how we can use data to help us understand ways that we are going to make the American dream possible for more and more students. One of his really sort of compelling opening observations is, if you were born a child in America in the 1950s, you had a 90% chance of having an economic future better than your parents. That's now down to 50% or below. And Chetty's work continues to focus on that, and I'm sure it'll be a great conversation. And he has a tie with Stony Brook, so come hear more about that. We're not that far away from the end of the semester and commencement. I would really like to ask more of our faculty to consider being there for the university ceremony as well. I know so many of you participate in your departmental ceremonies, and that's enormously important. But for many parents, so too is the university ceremony. That is the big, grand ceremony, and they love seeing faculty there. It sends the message of the care that we as a campus community have for our students. It gives us an opportunity to celebrate them. We have a commencement team that's been working on some ideas of improving our ceremony and making it a little bit, more exciting for families. If you have ideas, we would love your input. So please consider that. And then, as you all may know from various different notices to campus, we will be having a ceremony shortly to rename what was formerly Sanger Hall in honor of Dr. May Edward Chen, who was the first African-American and Native American woman to graduate from what was then Bellevue Hospital Medical College. It's now NYU School of Medicine. She was a tireless advocate who broke down racial and socioeconomic barriers to ensure access to high quality care. The ceremony is at noon on Wednesday, and I would love to see some more of you there. And then just a very quick statement in response to what was just forwarded to the Senate for consideration, the resolution. I want to take a moment very briefly to say that I certainly, and Stony Brook certainly, and completely support the freedom of speech and the academic freedom of our faculty. That is a commitment that is both personal and institutional. We appreciate that many in the community wish to continue dialogue on an important subject. I know that the provost has met with a number of faculty on a number of occasions, that he has told faculty that he is willing to continue these conversations, and I know that he is going to continue to do so. There may continue to be details about which we disagree, but that's okay. We'll continue the dialogue. We continue to be supportive of Dr. Hayward's work and her emphasis on the importance of police de-escalation techniques. And we agree with you that it is good for universities to routinely review their policies. That is work that we are committed to doing, whether it is social media policies or policies that speak more specifically to the matters you all have addressed. We just received the resolution. We would like to have time to look at that, and this work will continue. I also think that it would be a good idea for the Senate to invite Larry Zacharies, our Vice President for Enterprise Risk Management and our Chief Security Officer, to maybe come address the Senate at some point to speak to a variety of questions that I know have risen, not only about this incident, but also about recent campus shootings on campuses, the many different things we do to support the safety of our faculty and the safety of this campus. And I think that might be a good topic for a future meeting. I'm happy to take questions. And excuse me for my cough. I still have this lingering cough from my bout with COVID, so.
Questions for the president?
Hello, President. I would like to address this parking issue again, and just quickly, in the last 2-3 University Senate meetings we've been talking about, and we appreciate your reports on your optimism on the funds that are going to be come to Stony Brook and all these new opportunities. But among these opportunities, at the same time, then I can't reconcile why also we're saying we're in crisis and we absolutely need to take more money from our staff, our poverty wages. So those things don't seem to reconcile for me. And also from all the comments that we saw on the Zoom and all the people who want to talk on this parking issue, it seems like it's a very important aspect of an important problem for our community. And would you agree that we need to talk more about this issue with higher administration too? And as GSU, this is an invitation actually, we're planning to hold a town hall for people to also ask and discuss all these questions that went unanswered. And if we invited you, and this is a formal invitation to Larry, both you and Kendra, and if you, we would also be happy if you're open to join that town hall.
So thank you for raising the question again. As you know, we are in a process, and we appreciate the many different opportunities to engage with the community. I know that both Larry and Kendra have done many of these, and they'll be at all of the ones that they can attend. I will also say that while I am optimistic that there will be additional funding, not a dime of that can be spent on parking. The money that would come would be in support of our faculty and our students and the research on our campus. Parking is in an IFR account, and neither state appropriation nor tuition dollars can go to cover the costs related to parking. So those are just separate buckets of money, and that's just a piece of it.
That's a SUNY policy, if I understand.
That is a SUNY policy.
Yeah. Unless.
Feel free to raise it with them.
On Zoom, Erez Zadok.
Erez, please.
Thank you. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you, President McGinnis. Thank you for taking my call. I heard you briefly mention modernizing the AT systems. You may recall that last year I co-chaired an effort that looked at multiple entities, and including what we call identity and access management. A presentation was given, everybody agreed it was great, but as you recall, the price tag was not cheap. My understanding is that Charlie, before he left, at least argued or managed to put it onto some sort of future budget. I'm wondering if just like SUNY Central has helped us get, sort of SUNY-wide licenses for LMS, and now I understand that ticketing systems are in the same situation. Is there an concerted effort to get SUNY involved in getting an IAM program for the entire SUNY system that then we might be able to get at a lower price? Because it's very, maybe a lot of people don't understand the importance of identity and access management, but very briefly, it's a lot of stuff that happens in the back end of our IT system. It's a lot of investment initially, but on the long run, it is going to make everyone more effective. And if you consider thousands of people being able to do their work more effectively, it more than compensates for the cost that you initially invest.
Yeah, so Erez, first of all, thank you for your work last year on identity access management. You are right. It is an enormously important thing that we need to invest in on this campus. I will say that SUNY understands well that there are many things in the IT space where we might be able to get, as you're sort of suggesting, better pricing if we do it more broadly with the many campuses that are in need of various issues. This is one of many on the table. I do not know if the support for IT capital is going to survive the budget. If you consider we're starting this negotiation with 3 budgets, it was only in one of those budgets. So whether or not it will survive or not, I don't know, but we are gonna have to do identity access management. We're near the end of our process in a CIO search, and this will obviously be something that the next CIO is gonna need to address rather quickly, along with quite a number of other issues. Jed, is there anything else you want me to say at the moment? Or Jed Shivers, do you want to come up to the mic and say a word?
Hi, Jed Shivers. I'm the Senior VP for Finance, Administration, and IT. Thanks for your comments. I think that from the standpoint of the executive committee that's working through major projects related to IT, the identity management project is really first on the list. And there is active work going on right now, which may soon be completed, where people from the West Campus and the East Campus are working together to try and craft a solution, which may have a few steps to it that get us gradually to where we need to go, but make it an affordable solution, hopefully with a single instance. So that is really the current direction that we're going in. And then, as President McGinnis said, we don't know if the IT capital dollars will survive the legislative process, but I personally have certainly talked with relevant people within the SUNY system about a number of potential solutions where we could be the leader or the pilot, and identity management is one of those items. So we'll see.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Given the hour, I think we'll cut off the questions at this point. I'm sorry, Madam President. I did want to mention that the Senate has, in fact, or will invite Larry Zaccarisi to talk about campus police issues. That is, our articulation with Suffolk County, incidents on campus, how they're handled, and so on and so forth at a Senate meeting in the early fall. So that's already on our agenda for the upcoming year. So we will cover that. Thank you. Next, we'll have remarks by our Provost Carl Leschway.
And given the time, I'm just going to refer everyone to my report that has been published. I will hit 3 very specific things. We now have our College of Business Dean, Haresh Gurnani from Wake Forest, will be coming this July. Very exciting hire, and really appreciative of the search committee and everyone in the college who really hung in there while a protracted set of negotiations happened. Second, similar to Dr. Paz mentioning the strategic plan at Health Sciences, we also are in the same kind of stage with our university strategic plan. We will be coming forward with vision, values, and themes towards priorities and getting feedback. We'll be announcing a campus-wide set of town halls in the later part of the month, focusing on initiatives and metrics. And we expect to have a fully completed draft by the summer, and then be able to fully announce and introduce the plan at the start of the fall semester. And the last thing I just want to mention is we have completed the IDEA Fellows search. We have 9 amazing candidates, and I'll talk more about that another day. So I did want to respond to the resolution, and Ken, thank you for raising that issue. First thing I want to do is just reiterate the president's point about the importance of academic freedom and freedom of speech, and the importance of our supporting that at the university. That is crucial to what we do together. There are some differences of opinion, and I will say that we've had multiple conversations. 2 months ago, I sat over there and answered many of the same questions that we've discussed today. And in the Senate Executive Committee, one of the questions raised was, would we consider retracting that part of the statement? And I thought I had answered that clearly. I talked to Richard yesterday, so it may not have been as clear, so I'm happy to do that now. We don't intend to retract that. And that is something that we feel really strongly about. At the same time, there is a lot that we can do together in terms of reviewing policies around social media, academic freedom, freedom of speech. We are committed to doing that. That is something we want to do in partnership with the Senate. And in the meeting, I think when we had talked about that initially, and I do think I said pretty clearly what my concerns were about that, we then moved to what some other possibilities might be. That was my sense of saying, let's continue to talk about that. And I did say, I mean, no matter where we were, I would always bring what we talked about to leadership, but it wasn't as clear to me that that wasn't as clear. I know I'm coming to the Arts and Sciences Senate next week. I expect we'll talk about this again. So I'm happy to continue talking about it, but I thought it was important that we made that statement. I thought it is important to also say that it is always important to be reviewing these policies, and we look forward to doing that. So that's the end of my report.
Questions for the provost? Ken?
Can I just respond?
Yes, please.
So I just want to make it clear that we do have a disagreement on how that meeting ended. I thought that you said that you didn't think that you would be willing to retract the statement, but that you would go back to the leadership team and come back to us with an answer as to whether or not you would. So this is the first time I'm hearing you say that you will not retract it. I guess given the time, maybe it's not fair, but I would like to know why you're not going to retract that. Maybe that can wait for the next meeting.
Yeah, and I do think I did answer that 2 months ago. That
I disagree, but obviously we have.
No, I'm saying 2 months ago here.
Oh.
I mean, that question did come up when I was here. I'm happy to come back to it again when there's more time next week. I'm happy to talk about it at the Arts and Sciences Senate. And I think it's important for me to be clear. I think when I had said what you said, which is, I don't see us doing that, I will bring it back. In my mind, that if something had changed, I would bring it back. But that's why I think it's important for me to say it now. Again, I will say it in that meeting, but okay. The point is, I have never said anything different. I've gotten responses from faculty, the first letter, we have always said the same thing. So I appreciate, and that's why I'm acknowledging it today, that we may have viewed that differently, but I've not wavered in any way at any point. So I do think that part is important also. But I do acknowledge that if you all felt that way, then then there's something I can do to make sure that I've closed the loop.
Other questions for the provost, either in the hall here or online? Rich?
Hannah from Zoom.
Hannah, you're on.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to put in my 2 cents on this and thank you very much for your willingness to work with us in joint governance to come up with a policy for social media. I think this is something that has been sorely lacking, and I really think we need to move forward on this. So thank you.
And this is a great project for our new Vice Provost for Academic Affairs that we're in the process of searching for. And so that's one of the reasons why we think that position is really important, because there are many areas where we want to review where we are and make sure we have strong policy.
Yes, because I think it needs to be broadcast far and wide so that we all understand where we're standing. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. I don't think so. Rich, anything else?
Nope.
Thank you, Provost Leishwings. We'll now have reports from our 2 UUP leaders. Andrew, standing by.
Hi, folks. I know we all want to go home. I will be quick. Last call for chapter elections. You should have received your ballots by now. They're due back in coming weeks, so just get those in. Upcoming events, we have a workshop on grievance and workplace concerns this week on the 4th at 12 p.m. on Zoom. You can learn about your rights, what constitutes a grievance or a workplace concern, how we help folks out who have workplace concerns, how to handle situations of counseling, discipline, etc. We have a membership meeting on the 5th this week, 12 p.m. It's in SAC Ballroom A or on Zoom. We will have our chief negotiator present, so you will get an update on the state of contract negotiations. We'll also discuss things we're going to do in coming weeks to try to win a fair contract before the budget is up. We'll also discuss parking, everyone's favorite topic, and have an awards ceremony as well. On the 6th from 5 to 7, we'll have a happy hour at the Hilton Garden Inn. I hope you could join us there. That's for West Campus folks. And we know that folks continue to want to talk about parking. We are one voice as a union. We are your voice at the bargaining table. So if you have issues, concerns, questions, please feel free to reach out to us as well, and we will make sure we bring those forward. We have had 2 town halls already, so we have a large, and a couple surveys. We have a lot of feedback. For all these events that I mentioned, you can go to our website, uupsbu.org/calendar to register. And I'm done. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Andrew. Questions for Andrew? Thanks very much.
You got it.
I think Bruce Kuby, are you on the line?
I am.
Okay, Bruce, you're
Richard.
closing the show here.
Just a couple of things. As Andrew stated, the chapter elections are coming to a close, so make sure you get your ballots in, have your voice be heard. We are actually having a workshop on problematic performance programs for our professionals on April 11th. You can RSVP to that by contacting the chapter office. And we're also collecting information regarding parking. We'll be forming a parking committee with the relevant stakeholders after the April 5th meeting that we have with administration regarding the ground rules that Larry Zachary's mentioned earlier in the meeting. And that's basically all I have for now.
Thanks very much. Oh, yes. So go ahead, Rich. Announce the results.
So for the resolution that was voted on earlier today, these are tentative results. Once again, we just have to validate the results that were on Zoom. But as of right now, endorse at 62 votes, not endorse at 6 votes, abstain at 7 votes with a 91% pass rate for in favor.
So the resolution passes. The Senate expresses its thanks to Allegra De Laurentiis for her eloquent proposal. Well, if there is nothing further, I will entertain a motion. Are there any objections? Apparently not. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks to all.